Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Unfiltered Table, a new series hosted by ACNET, a unified talent selection platform. At ACNET, our mission is simple to help organizations and professionals build real momentum in their careers, their teams, and their futures. We believe better hiring decisions create better workplaces, stronger businesses, and a more meaningful professional growth for everyone involved.
You as an HR person or you as a talent person, your role is really to clear a path for the associate at the senior level, to give them critical experience, to expose them to areas that they may not have thought about, to help them become more where your strengths and opportunities are, which it does as a derivative of the Myers-Briggs tool. But what it does is it helps you as an associate identify if you think of the roof, this is the roof for the overall HR landscape, right? So at the top, when you look at HR, so if you look at it from as a helicopter going down, you see the roof. But what supports the roof are the COEs, and the COEs and the HRBPs all depend on the system, which is the foundation. The HR operating models themselves are not evolving to keep up with the evolution of the technology, right? So you can't have a traditional HR house, if you will, with advancing technology, because what happens then is the technology becomes too advanced and the COEs can't keep up. So both have to evolve at the same time.
Organizations today are navigating AI, global workforces, changing employee expectations, and constant business transformation. But many HR operating models were built for a very different environment. As AI continues to reshape how work gets done, leaders are being forced to rethink what should be automated, what should remain human, and how HR can evolve to support a more agile workforce. So, today, we're exploring why traditional HR operating models are struggling to keep up and what AI enabled workforce strategy actually looks like and what organizations need to do to prepare for future work. Joining me for that conversation today is Mohammed Haffejee. Welcome to the Unfiltered Table.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
How are you doing today?
I'm very well. Thank you for asking. I just came from an event which was quite interesting because it was an awards evening for associates, and it was about recognizing their efforts and what they contribute to it. And I think sometimes we forget how important it is to do these types of recognition ceremonies, because it means a lot to people. And I think for some people, the fact that they get this amount of money or this voucher and they go back home and they're able to take their family out and be able to buy things that maybe they didn't budget for, like little luxuries, I think means a lot to people. And it's at the end of a long struggle to get this kind of recognition going, and for people to feel appreciated, and to also encourage managers to make people feel appreciated. And what's interesting is that a lot of it now is geared towards automation. And it turns out that people are increasingly more aware of automation. And it's not just some scary situation. People talk about it. We awarded people for it today, and people seem to be okay with it, I guess.
Wow. Okay. That sounds like a really interesting event. It sounds like it's beneficial to a lot of people. And I'm glad that you were able to be part of something that gives recognition to so many people who do so much hard work. And I can imagine that, especially in the field that you are in, it is quite a thankless job. Having to deal with people all day, every day, having to deal with not just, clients and actual employees, but having to deal with executives and your own bosses, which can be just as grueling.
Yeah, I think the difference is that when you deal with operations associates at lower levels, the issues are more bread and butter issues, right? How do I have job security? How long will I have to work to, before I'm even considered for promotion? Whereas at the senior level, the perception and the expectation changes completely. Because if you were to chart your trajectory as an associate from when you start out, maybe as an intern, to when you get to be at a very senior position, the rise up to middle management is almost linear. right? For every 1 or 2 years, you get a promotion, you go up. But middle management, the graph starts to taper off. And this is the most challenging part, because when the graph tapers off, you as an HR person or you as a talent person, your role is really to clear a path for the associate at the senior level, to give them critical experience, to expose them to areas that they may not have thought about, to help them become more self-aware. So tools like, for example, the Hogan survey, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's
No,
a tool that we use widely. It's kind of like the successor to the Myers-Briggs tool. I don't know if you're familiar with the Myers-Briggs.
yes, I do know
So
the Myers-Briggs.
previously, we used to use the MBTI or the Myers-Briggs tool. Now we more commonly use the Hogan tool. And the benefit of the Hogan tool is not to tell us where your strengths and opportunities are, which it does as a derivative of the Myers-Briggs tool. But what it does is it helps you as an associate identify what are your derailers. So under pressure, we always defer to our natural personality. And what the Hogan survey does is it makes you aware of which situations are trigger points and how much you need to put into it so that it doesn't devolve into total chaos. And that's the challenge, right? So then it becomes clear, like in this quadrant where you are a lower operations person, or maybe an intern or even a graduate, your requirements are much different because it's about every opportunity and you want to make every opportunity count. But the moment you get to the senior level, and we see it a lot with people who get promoted very quickly, because if they get promoted very quickly, the expectation is always, oh, every 1.5 years, I'm going to, get to another position and I'll get to a higher level. And then they get to a point where it just becomes like a stalemate, right? The graph literally becomes flat, because the higher you go, the less positions become available, and the more senior people tend to stay longer, and then the opportunities just become less. And this is the reason why you end up having senior executives leave. And this is why also automation is such a challenge, because more and more people use automation. So the skill is more evenly spread now, because now it's not what you know or what you studied. It's more about how quickly can you get to the information, and automation or AI does that for us. So it changed. I think in the last 2 years, the whole talent landscape, the whole HR landscape has changed completely because of automation and operating models and how it's changing and the pace and at which it's changing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I feel like because automation is so new and is still kind of being, we're still learning how to operate using AI and all these tools. It can be kind of hard to keep pace with how fast that is moving, right? You have all these new AI tools, you have all these new operational tools, and then we still have the same systems that we were using before. But that actually perfectly puts us into our first question. So, why are traditional HR operating models struggling to keep up with modern enterprise complexity?
I don't think it's because traditional HR operating models are failing. It's more about how quickly AI is expanding in the market, right? Um, and the problem with that is we have traditional HR operating models. So you either have a very hierarchical model, or you have kind of like a matrix organization, the latter has become the more popular one. So many large scale organizations have COEs, right? So I think the best way to think of it is the structure of a house, right? So every COE is a pillar, right? So you have compensation and benefits, or now it's called total rewards. And then you have talent, which is talent acquisition as well as talent sustainability. And then you have employee relations, legal, change management. Like, think of it all as like the columns or walls of a house. And then you have the foundation. Right. And the foundation is the HR system, because the HR system has to feed each one of these columns, or it has to support each one of these columns. And then if you think of the roof, this is the roof, or the overall HR landscape, right? So at the top, when you look at HR, so if you look at it from as a helicopter going down, you see the roof. But what supports the roof are the COEs, and the COEs and the HR BPs all depend on the system, which is the foundation. So effectively, if the foundation is not a strong foundation, then the information you have to support these columns or these COEs is weak. And if the columns are weak, then the roof topples in, right? So that's, I think, in my opinion, the best way to describe a traditional HR operating model. So what it's not that the traditional HR models uh, are struggling. It's more that the HR operating models themselves are not evolving to keep up with the evolution of the technology, right? So you can't have a traditional HR house, if you will, with advancing technology, because what happens then is the technology becomes too advanced and the COEs can't keep up. So both have to evolve at the same time. And I think what AI and automation is doing is it's giving you the opportunity to examine what you have today and to ask the question, does this HR operating model that I have today work for us now? And will it continue to work for us for the next 1, 2, or 3 years? I think
Yeah.
looking beyond 3 years is foolish, because the speed at which technology changes, in 3 years' time, what you have today will probably be obsolete
Yeah,
anyway,
it won't
right?
exist anymore.
So you have to foster that kind of thinking, that you have to continuously look at yourself. And this is not a new concept. It's continuous improvement culture. It's something that most, especially in the manufacturing industry, continuously do, which is continuously say, how can we do this better? Is there a more efficient way of doing it? And I think this is the paradigm shift that needs to happen. Whether HR people do that is a different thing, and whether they are early adopters of changing technology is another thing, right? So I don't know if you know this. It's a famous book that's often used in HR training. It's Who Moved My Cheese. Have you ever seen it? It's like a little tiny book
I don't
about the
think
two
I have.
mice. One is and one is and the one is always looking for cheese and new ways to find cheese, and they're running around in the maze, and the other
Yeah.
one doesn't. And it's really that. It's like, how much of an appetite do you have to want to examine your operating model and examine the technology that's available and try and find a path where you both can coexist, really?
Yeah. That's really interesting. Do you think that many companies probably don't realize that they're operating with outdated structures? Or do you think that the challenge isn't necessarily the people, it's more the systems actually around them?
Think it's all of it, and I'll
Yeah.
explain what I mean. Many HR professionals end up in HR in a very unstructured way, right? Some
Mm.
people come from, and typically the route is people from finance would typically move into a rewards role because they think it's all about numbers, but it's actually not. HR BPs typically, you see a lot of it. And if you look at the career history of heads of HR, you typically see that they spend significant time in recruitment. But recruitment is only talent acquisition, right? It's not so much talent sustainability. And
Yeah.
even in talent sustainability, people always focus on L&D and never really focus on SMD, which is senior management development. People focus on learning and development.
Oh. Mm.
So one, it's really about upping the game of HR professionals and the kinds of HR professionals that we hire. The second part to it is the technology. Technology is often considered a significant expense. So people always defer to, if it's not broken, then there's no point in trying to fix it, right?
Yeah.
So people say, oh, our headcount doesn't really change that much. What's the point of investing in new technology? And
Hmm.
the biggest technology source that's of importance to most organizations is always the payroll system, right?
Hmm.
Because they feel if the payroll system works and people get paid on time, the pay slip is delivered on time, then what more do I need? Because everything else I can manage, right? In a very traditional organization, talent sustainability is done at a very senior level only. So when we look at talent reviews, it's really just the executive team, or you hear people say the top 100 people in the organization or the top 75 people in the organization. It's like, I think the best analogy I can use is if you think of a cup of cappuccino. I don't know, I'm
Yeah.
sure you drink cappuccino, right? So
Yeah.
if you cut the cup crosswise, the amount of foam at the top is very little, but
Hmm.
the amount of black coffee at the bottom is quite a lot. And this is kind of a representation of most organizations, because most of the associates are the black coffee, and the very senior people or the favored people or people who get executive sponsorship is the foam at the top. And it never really mixes, right? Because the
Yeah.
moment, if you stir a cup of cappuccino, what you're really getting is a cafe latte, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and if you let it stand for too long, it really literally tastes like a cafe latte. And I think that's what people are afraid of, from moving from having a cup of cappuccino to having a latte, because in a latte, you have a more homogeneous workforce, which is more about meritocracy rather than about favoritism. Whereas if you continue to have and serve cups of cappuccino, you're never going to get this mix, which is unfortunate, because having a mix is all about diversity, right? Like,
Yeah.
people make a big thing about DEI, and they're like, oh, we hire diverse groups, we hire minority groups. That doesn't mean anything, right? Like, diver, diverse, the explanation that is always used is diversity is when you invite people to the party, right? Equity is when you see them at the party. And inclusion is they end up dancing at the party. Nobody asks them to. They just, everybody, it's for open for everyone. And from a technology point of view, so if you think about that, the majority of the organizations are afraid of adopting new technology because they feel that the technology they have serves the purpose and the need, and the biggest need is payroll. And you have an organization that is not being self-aware and self-critical of the types of HR professionals they have. It's a recipe for disaster, because you're never going to move forward, right? You're never going to say, oh, I need better technology, or what technology is available and how can this help me? And I think that's where HR professionals lack foresight, because they're not thinking beyond how can I serve the organization better. And the reason I say that is because today, if you think of the Dave Ulrich model, most organizations sit in the first quadrant because we're viewed as administrators. Did you file the leave? Did you complete the medical insurance? Did you do
Yeah.
the benefits online? It's all of these, like, you need to do this, you need to do this. Did you sign the contract? When did you bring a sick certificate? So a lot of HR professional time goes into managing high volume, low value transactions. And the technology that's around today is really about reducing the amount of high volume, low value transactions that HR business partners especially do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I can totally imagine how easy it is to put it out of your mind, especially going back to what you were saying with that, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And it's, when you get everything done or when you have the final picture, it's really easy to just not think about all of the in between stuff and whether or not it's being done ethically or whether or not it's being done properly or on time or whatever. It's just like, okay, it's done. This is what we're used to. This is how we need to get it done. So I can see that absolutely for sure. Going into my next question, how is AI changing the way organizations think about workforce strategy and service delivery?
I think the biggest misconception that people have is that AI will replace people. It doesn't. In reality, what's really happening is that AI changes the nature of work, right?
Okay.
It's what I just mentioned earlier on about these high volume, low value transactions. So what AI is doing is it's removing that repetitive administrative tasks so people can focus more on judgment matters, on collaboration, on, customer value. And the reason I say that, because today, for example, the adoption of chatbots is quite high, right? But
Yeah.
people still want to be able to have a opportunity to speak to a person, right? But a
Yeah.
chatbot is there to still help the person get to the question or to the answer much quicker, right? I think what people never consider is what we call payroll leakage in the HR space, which is about the amount of time that we spend assisting associates so that they can get the right answer when they could have got it themselves. Right. So during, for example, in onboarding, you might share with someone, this is the leave policy. This is how many annual leave days you get, how many sick leave days you get, paternity leave, adoption leave, like all these different leave types. So it's part of the onboarding. Everybody's excited. And then nobody looks at it again until maybe you have a baby and you have to go on maternity leave. And then you start emailing people, oh, I'm going on maternity leave. How many maternity leave days do I get? When do I need to go? How, you start asking these questions. So when you reach out to an HR business partner, as an example, they have to stop everything that they're doing to get an answer to you, right? And the longer they take to get an answer to you reflects poorly on them, because you, as the internal customer, you're like, oh, they do this on a daily basis. They should be able to give me an answer really quickly. Why is it taking so long, right? So
Yeah.
you follow that email up the next day with another email like, hey, I sent you an email yesterday about my maternity leave that's upcoming. How many maternity leave days I get? They may reply to you immediately, may not reply to you, or maybe reply in another day's time. That reflects poorly on them. So what the chatbot does is you feed it, it's about prompt engineering. You feed the question, the system gives you the answer. If after that you're still not sure, then reaching out to an HRPP makes sense, right? But what
Yeah.
the AI technology is doing is really speeding up the process from an HR point of view for associates who need information, for managers who need information, for an organization that needs information.
Yeah.
Most organizations only push females into senior leadership without any support from an L&D point of view or from an SMD point of view. But at the same time, they also pay women less. So when you look at and use technology in that regard, so if you then have a reputation for supporting women as an example, it increases your unique selling point as an organization, because it becomes attractive for other females who may not have wanted to consider working for you, but when they interact with other senior females and they find out, oh, this organization does this for women, that for women, it piques their interest to want to work. And I think that's when you're winning, is when you're using technology to your benefit, not for the short term, but overall from a strategic point of view.
Yeah.
Because ultimately that's what it is, right? AI is meant to improve business performance, but also the employee experience. And the only way you can do that is if you have technology that you can access, which delivers efficiency, right? Um, which increases the speed of trust. I previously worked in an organization which was a global organization, and we were required to do a global headcount report. You won't believe it. It took us almost 2 weeks to count the number of people we have globally.
Wow. That's crazy. So it sounds like it's kind of a mixture between a mindset shift with what you were talking about earlier, but then also kind of understanding that AI isn't replacing HR and it's certainly not replacing roles. It's just changing where HR and specific roles, wherever you need technology, spends its time, right? You know, exactly what you were just saying just now, how you have all these different systems and it all takes time. And at the end of the day, you have to keep track of everything versus just having this one thing that can keep track of it all for you. So it's saving time, but it's also hard to, again, honestly, going back to the first question that we had, it's hard accepting that this thing can do the work for you, you know, and accepting that it can keep track of everything that you have. And I can understand it being both a mindset shift and, you know,
Yeah,
understanding.
I think the challenge is not that HR people would be afraid of what the tools can do from an AI point of view, but for HR people, it's more about their insecurity, about their
Mhm.
job security. And the reason I say that is because traditionally, or in a traditional HR operating model, we always talk about job titles, right? And we plan around job titles and we plan around organizations around job titles. With AI, it's not about what your job title is in the organization, it's about what skill you have. Can you manipulate the technology to be able to deliver a far superior performance that focuses more on engagement
Yeah.
rather than focusing on administration? I think
Okay.
that's the way if you if you think of it graphically, I think in a traditional organization, better you are at administration from an HR point of view, the quicker your rise is, because you seem to be managing information, you're on top of everything, you know what your business is doing, you can answer all the questions.
Yeah.
You're answering questions around skill, you're answering questions around measurable facts. And to be able to have answers to skill, you have to be able to look at empirical data and make an assessment of that data. And that's why I don't like the word feedback, because it's kind of like, oh, I need to look back, right? It's
Yeah.
always about looking forward. So when you have all of this data, what assumptions can you make out of this data and how can you use it moving forward? And that's a skill. If you are able to explain something very technical in a non-technical manner, that's a skill. if it's anything, whatever your profession is, if you ask me a question, a legal matter, and I just gave you an answer from a the HR legal technical background, be like, okay, kind of knows what he's saying, right?
Yeah.
But if I'm able to siphon that information and regurgitate it to you in the same manner that I would explain it to my 80-year-old grandmother, and you understand it instantly, that's a skill.
Wow. Okay, that's really interesting. Thank you for clearing that up and thank you for those examples. I feel like, I never really thought of it like that. I never thought of it in terms of insecurity but I think you're right. If you have the skill, then there's no way whatever tools you have, there's no way that the job can't be done
Exactly.
correctly. Yeah.
Exactly. Because if you focus a lot on the administration piece, you become fully replaceable. Everybody is replaceable, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you have a unique skill, yes, you could replace the person, but the time that you would take to replace the person or find someone with an equal amount of skill is far more difficult than replacing someone that's extremely administrative, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
I don't know if you've watched this movie, The Devil Wears Prada.
Yes, I have.
So, in the first movie, he says, um, what do you want? Do you want the gold star? Do you know how many girls would kill to have this job where
Hmm.
you just deign to work? That's exactly it, right? You hire, like tomorrow, if I lose an HR business partner, there are hundreds of people I could hire to be an HR business partner because the
Yeah.
focus is on administration. File this, call that person, give them the
Yeah.
contract.
Just get the job done.
Exactly, right? Exactly that. But the skill of, oh, you hired 500 people in the last year, but you've
Hmm.
had this many people leave. When I look at the exit data, the biggest reason they're leaving is based on the amount of money we give them. What do you do with that information? It's the so what question.
Yeah.
Do you go to the rewards team and say, hey, between grade X and Y, we've had so many people that have left, and all the reasons they've cited is because of better opportunities outside the organization. Have you folks in the reward space looked at how our salary data matches the market data from a salary survey point of view? And what do we need to do to be able to uplift these people to be able to retain them? And if you have a number, like that you need to increase people's salaries 10% across the board. That has a number. That number has to come from somewhere. So
Yeah.
you have to go back to the business. And this is where the skill comes in. And not say to the business, we're losing people because we're not paying them enough. They'll be like, so what? Find other people, right? But the discussion should be more around if we lose these people, we lose their skill and their experience and knowledge of the business. Yes, we can replace them, but the time that it will take for those people who will replace them to be effective is quite a long time, right? Like you think about it, in a medium to senior level role, typically your notice period outside of the US, because in the US it's always just 2 weeks, but
Yeah.
it's normally 2 months, right? So someone announces that they're leaving the organization, you accept their resignation. So in
Mhm.
this 2 months, you try very hard to be able to hire someone. So
Yeah.
maybe you start the hiring process and maybe you're lucky enough that by the end of the first month, you're able to find someone. That person signs the contract, but that person themselves has to serve notice in their existing organization.
Yeah.
So it's almost impossible unless you find a candidate who's currently searching for a role that can start immediately, that you would have an actual handover between the successor and the incumbent.
Yeah.
The person leaves, the position has now been vacant for 2 months. Maybe the new person starts in month 3, right? So now you've had 3 months since they've announced their resignation. This person starts. It takes someone new in a role between 6 and 9 months to learn the job, right?
Mhm.
So let's
Yeah.
say the person we selected who starts now after 3 months, or maybe even after 4 months, because maybe they had to serve a 2 months notice and
Mhm.
has 6 months. So it's between 9 and 10 months before you actually see anything significant being delivered from this person, because they have to learn the business. They have to understand who are the key players. They have to understand where the organization is going.
Yeah.
So you've lost effectively a lot of time. And
Yeah,
what
and
that has
money.
done is exactly time and money. And the money comes in because the people below that level now have to do more work, right?
Yeah.
And we don't say, oh, for the last 6 months, you had to do 1.5 times more of what was required of you. So we're going to pay you 1.5 times more, right?
Yeah.
So those people have burnout. They're not able, it flows downhill like the army.
Yeah.
This one
No,
is not doing
absolutely.
it. And that's the problem that it creates. And that's why skill is so important. And I think that's why the focus on skill is so important, not so much on the job.
Yeah. I know. I can definitely see that. It goes back to if you like AI does not replace anything, because if you don't have the skill, if you don't have the knowledge, if you don't have the ability, you're not really going to get anywhere. Like, yes, you can absolutely create a data sheet and talk about your employees' KPIs and all of that. But if you don't actually have an understanding about the meaning of everything and where everything needs to lie, it doesn't matter what tools you're going to use, it's not going to work.
Yeah,
So,
and it's really about,
yeah.
when you migrate to some form of Gen AI or agentic AI,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it, it's not about just automating your process. It's about looking at your process very critically and asking the key questions. Do I
Mhm.
need this process? How can
Yeah.
I change it? What are some of the challenges I have with this? It's an opportunity for you to be very critical, not about improving the efficiency by removing the inefficiency, but about improving the efficiency based on the direction in which the business is going.
Yeah,
Because
not taking out sorry.
yeah, exactly. What works today may not work in a year's time. So you
Yeah.
kind of have to anticipate, what do I need in a year's time? What do I need in 2 years' time? Let me build that into the system I'm changing now and the
Mhm.
system that I'm removing the inefficiencies from, so that the system is both efficient for me now, but for at least another 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, no, absolutely, looking at the bigger picture. Going into our next question, what becomes difficult when organizations try to automate HR without redesigning the operating model itself?
So the first thing is, technology doesn't fix poor processes. It's what we've been saying about removing the inefficiencies out of the system that you have today. And the reason I say that is what I said earlier on, is that organizations end up automating inefficient workflows. Right. So you're not being self critical about what you do today, and you're not looking at, where are the inefficiencies I have. So what they really do is they take the system today, or they take the administration they have today, and they go, oh, if I automated it, it will make it easier. Mm, yeah, it will make it easier for you to work, but you still have the inefficiency, because what you're really doing is you're speeding up the inefficiency. You're not making an inefficient system more efficient. You're just making an inefficient system faster at being inefficient. And I think
Yeah.
that's what people don't get, right?
So
Um,
automation, no matter what, automation cannot fix a broken process.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
doesn't fix a poor process, because what the question you have to ask is, why does this process exist? Why do
Mhm.
we do leave administration as an example? Can it be simplified? Like, is how can we make it easier for the employee? Is it about making it easier from an employee self-service perspective? Is it about easier uh, management from manager self-service? Then the question of who owns it. So if you take leave as an example, right, it's the
Mhm.
one thing that really drives me crazy as an HR person. Leave is between the manager and the employee, but
Mhm.
somehow leave always ends up being an HR problem. And the
Yep.
reason for that is because people either don't take their leave, so they end up accumulating a lot of leave. When
Yeah.
you accumulate a lot of leave, you create what's considered in accounting a leave liability. Because for every day worth of leave you accrue, the company must have money to be able to repay you that leave the day that you exit the organization if you've not used the leave. So you have to show the leave liability on the balance sheet. So in some companies or in some countries, people just never go on leave, right?
Mhm.
So they think of leave as like banking leave, or, they'll not go on leave for 2 or 3 years, and before you know it, they have like 80 days of leave. So if that person exits the organization, you must be able to pay the 80 days of leave. So when finance typically sees, oh, there's a lot of leave liability, they don't contact the managers or the employees, they contact HR. They're like, this is your problem, you have to fix it.
Yep.
And I'm like, so my job is to tell managers how to do their job? That
Oh, your
that's not
job.
an efficient use of my time, right?
Yeah.
So, and it stems from the fact that managers don't plan leave very well. So they
Mhm.
don't say, oh, I have a team of 5 people, who's going to take leave when? And, some men wake up too late, and then they realize, oh, nobody's taken leave. And then they're like, oh, or everybody says, oh, I'm going to take leave over Christmas or over the summer. And then there's nobody to work, right? So it's again, who owns it? And in the case of leave, it's the managers and the employees who both equally own it, because they both have to take leave. Because if you don't take leave, you don't have time to rest. If you don't rest, you don't really deliver good results, right?
Mm.
And if you think about AI technology, the most important question you have to ask is which decisions or what decisions genuinely require human judgment? Because if it's just if it's just an administrative matter, then Gen AI or chatbot can fix that. How many days maternity leave do I have? You don't need a human to tell you that.
Yeah.
But if you have, for example, a challenging pregnancy and you may need more time because maternity leave is going to be insufficient for your own recovery, you might say, can I tag my annual leave onto my maternity leave to extend the time that I'm off? The chatbot may not know that answer because that may require special approval because you're taking two different leave types back to back.
Yes. No,
But
that's
asking the system, how many annual days leave do I have? Oh, you have 26 annual leave days. How many days maternity leave do I have? You have 90 days maternity leave. Then the
yeah.
question is, can I take them back to back? Then the system fails, right? So that's a question that would need human intervention because you may need approval for that. You may need planning for that. So it's that kinds of questions that you have to ask because that's what you can make more efficient from an AI point of view. But that's talking about it from a technology point of view. On the flip side of that is about preparing the people.
Yeah,
Uh, Employees need to understand why changes are happening, right?
absolutely.
How will the roles evolve and what support will they receive? Because you see this a lot from an IT point of view. Most IT departments most companies have a ticketing system, right? So you have an IT issue, you have to open up a ticket, it will be assigned to someone, and that person will then come and fix it, right? And the turnaround time may be 2 or 3 days. But you may have a good relationship with someone in IT, right? So it's like me, I'm guilty of this all the time. I call them in IT, I'm like, hey, you know what? My monitor's not working. Oh, I'll just pop around and come have a look at it. The
Yeah.
moment you make that exception, because then they don't record it as a ticket, they record it as what they call as a walk up.
Mhm.
It just came out. So you so did they fix it quicker because I'm the head of HR? Or did they genuinely fix it because they had the time to fix it, right? So when
Yeah.
you look at the data, it's kind of skewed because you're not really getting a true picture. For them, it makes their data look really good because I call them, no ticket was opened, it's recorded as a walk up, they fix it in like 1 hour.
Yeah.
Whereas if it went through a ticketing system, it goes through a process kind of thing. So when you go to so people are like, oh, we want to get information really quickly. But the moment they realize that they have to take a few steps, they're like, oh, I don't want to work on the system. Can't I just speak to someone, right?
Yeah.
So on the one side, you're improving the technology and making information more accessible. But at the same time, with regards to the people who were just used to calling HR people, dropping by their office, now you're like, hey, I don't have to answer these questions for you. You can look for the questions yourself.
Yeah.
And, you see it a lot in societies where a country may develop at a very rapid pace, but the people don't develop at the same rate of change. So people end up being very conservative in a country that may be very
Right.
developed, as an
Yeah.
example.
No, that absolutely makes a lot of sense. So with the integration of automation, also that is a very sorry, just going back to what you were just saying, that's a very key distinction. I feel like that needs to be recognized is the use of automation or the use of AI or whatever it may be and the human aspect of things, right? You can't use one to replace the other, but you also can't solely, nowadays, with how fast systems and organizations are changing, you can't solely rely on one also, right? So my question to you is with the integration of automation, how should organizations decide which employees to reskill, upskill, redeploy, or transition during AI transformation? Because I'm sure that no matter what, when you use AI and you start integrating AI into everyday workforce strategy or systems, you're going to not necessarily need all of the skills that former employees used to offer.
I think you're on the money when in asking that question, because that's the most difficult leadership question, because it's the one question that affects people's careers and livelihoods directly, right? The question of which employees do I reskill, which ones do I, you said upskill and redeploy, right?
Yeah.
Um, and you have to ask three questions really. And the first question you have to ask is, the skill that I have today, will it continue to remain strategically important in 1, 2, or 3 years' time? And second, does the person possess skills that remain um, or so first is the skill relevant? The second thing is, do they demonstrate the ability and willingness to learn, right?
Yeah.
Because you may say, oh, they don't have the skill, but I want to keep the person. But the person may be like, oh, I'm not really interested in learning a new skill. I'm like 50, AI is changing so quickly, at 55, I may not want to be here, I may not have a job.
Yeah.
And the third most important question you have to ask is, can their experience continue to create value in the organization? So maybe they may not have value in the job they do now, but you may redeploy them to another position where they may add value in that position. Right. So your question was, how do you identify it? The only way you can identify it is really understanding the strategic direction of the business. Like, where do you see the organization going? If you use the example of, say, a manufacturing organization, like a major beverage organization, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of focus in the beverage industry on the amount of sugar that goes into beverages. And some countries have imposed a sugar tax. So the
Yeah.
cost of buying sugared drinks is much higher than buying, say, water as an example. The growth of the beverage industry, where it's taxed very highly from a sugar point of view, may have an impact on the number of people you will have, because you may need to shift focus from producing high sugar drinks to lower sugar drinks.
Yeah. The capability. Yeah, absolutely. So it's less about replacing people and getting rid of people. It's more about understanding their capabilities and whether or not those specific capabilities and skills will be able to be either translated into something else or used later on. That's what I'm getting.
Exactly.
Okay.
And if you have that type of conversation with people, it's
Mhm.
more meaningful to me, because the focus is less on, do I have the right people? But the focus is more around, yes, the technology is changing, but acknowledging that you have people with knowledge and experience, and understanding where and how you can use those people going
Yeah.
forward, rather than just saying, oh, we're going to automate things. AI is going to come in. We don't need you any longer.
Yes. So it's more about workforce evolution, not workforce reduction, which I think is valid, when you are talking, especially since AI is so new. It's valid when talking about it, right? Because I think it really can come across workforce reduction, right? You just want to replace people and everything, but again, going back to the skills, you can't replace the human side of business. It just your business will not run without it. So no, that's wonderful. That sounds like a
I
significant
think
approach.
at the end of the day, successful AI requires the appropriate and correct prompts. So when you work on a system like Claude or ChatGPT, it's not about finding the answer, it's about asking the right question. But
Mhm.
you need to have the skill to be able to ask the right question. It's a lot like when you search for a role and you're using an AI tool as an example, right? Some people will just be like, here's my CV, here's the job description.
Mhm.
Tell me what I need to change. The better question to ask is rather, here's the job description, here's my CV, taking into consideration, for example, market trends. What can I amplify in my CV that
Yeah.
makes it more attractive and will not be filtered out in an ATS tool, but where an executive recruiter might find interesting. So it's
Yeah.
not what the system can do. The system will do what you ask it to do. It's about what you're asking and how you're asking. That's the most important thing.
No, absolutely. That's amazing. Thank you for that. What does a future ready workforce strategy actually look like over the next 5 years?
So if you recall back in the earlier part of our conversation, I keep making the point that it's skills, and that skills will become more important than job titles. Right?
Yeah.
AI will become part of everyday work. It's not going to be something separate. You see it today, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Now I'm at the thought of giving away my age. So when I was in school, if you wanted to know anything, you had to know how to use the Huey Dewey classification system in the library. Many people may not even know that it exists, right? So you had to go to this catalog of index cards and you had to like look up the, like a particular subject that you were looking for, right?
Yeah.
And then you needed to take that card, give it to the librarian, and he or she would then direct you to the correct section in the reference section of the library.
Yeah.
And then you'd find the reference book and you'd read the reference book, but you were never allowed to take the reference book out. So you had to make notes. In my little suburban library, it became a big thing the day that the library had its own photocopy machine. Right. So people may not know what a photocopy machine is, but you had a
No,
photocopy machine, right?
we're not
So
we're not that you're not that old. We know what a photocopy machine is.
So then you were allowed to make photocopies. So you were not allowed, you didn't have to anymore sit there and transcribe notes, whatever. You could make
Yeah.
photocopies, take it home, and you could read it. When you
Mhm.
got home, you did your assignment, you had to type it on a typewriter. That quickly evolved when I got to university, where I was introduced to Fisher film. People may not know what Fisher film is, but when you went into a library, like a university library, you could look on this computer and you'd like look into it and everything was digitized in some it was called Fisher film. I don't know how else to describe it, but you could look at the documents instantly and you could take a print of the documents. By the time I had left university, online search engines were just becoming a thing. So much so that the what's it called? The American Society for Psychology, I think it's called ASP or something, is the organization globally that sets the standard for the way you reference items in an essay, as an example. And at the end, you do a bibliography and you say that you cite the source. And they were faced with the question of, how do we teach students how to cite sources that are online? And it was very pedantic. It was like a square bracket online, the source, and you had to write the date that the source was published, etc. That
Yeah.
has now evolved into what we have today, which is AI. So what's changed is that students can get to information much quicker. The students haven't changed. The subjects haven't changed. It's just the source of the material that's changed. Getting to it, yes, we now have tools where you can determine how much plagiarization exists in an essay or in a piece of work, but that's no different from how it was done before. It still comes down to skill more than just about the job title. And if I just think of my own time, it's that learning is continuous, right? Because it
Yeah.
continuously changes. And it's just that the pace of change demands it. Like you did something one way and then technology was introduced and you did it another way
Yep.
and you learned a new technology and you adapted to it. And people adapt because if you don't adapt, you die, is the saying, right?
Yeah.
And people learn to adapt really quickly. And the most important thing is that organizations recognize that it's not technology alone which creates competitive advantage. You still
Yeah.
need people, right? AI is never really going to replace a true artist, right?
Yeah.
If you think of choreography,
Mhm.
like you still need a person to teach another person a dance routine. As
Yeah.
an artist, you can teach a student to be an art student, but each student, when they paint the same subject, paint a different picture. You can feed AI information and say, oh, can you design a picture for me that shows X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, absolutely. So the organizations that succeed are the ones that can adapt continuously.
And continuously support the development of the skills of people, whether
Yes.
that is about reskilling or upskilling or redeploying them, which is what you had asked earlier on as well.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. And your insight has been so helpful and so valuable. I feel like I've learned, because just from a candidate perspective, that was a fear of mine, where I was like, "Oh my gosh, am I even going to be able to find a job, with AI and automation taking over?" So hearing it from your perspective and how automation can actually really help companies, and it's not about replacing humans, about, helping us and supporting us and becoming a better organization, was really nice to hear. So thank you so
Yeah, I
much.
think I think the biggest challenge we will have, and we see it now in recruitment, is this big thing about age bias.
Hmm.
Because people have this perception that if you're over the age of 30, you don't know how to use technology. If you're over the age of 30, you don't know anything, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I understand it because if I think about my parents when I was younger and they turned 50, like you cringe, you're like, oh my God, you're so old, right? But now
Yeah.
that I am 50, I don't feel 50, but I feel that when my parents were 50, they felt like they were 70 because their
Yeah.
challenges were so different, right? I grew up in apartheid South Africa, which was really tough. We didn't have access to a lot of things. That hasn't changed in the world today, right? Like if you look at places like the US, diversity is still an issue.
Yeah, massive issue.
Minority rights are still an issue.
Mhm.
So when you an employee in a place like the US, your challenges are no different from my parents in apartheid South Africa in the 1970s. Because in as intelligent as you can be, you still considered less than rather than equal to.
Yeah, it's that going back exactly what you were talking about earlier with the difference between equality, equity, and inclusion
Yeah.
is like exactly that. Like we might have in the United States, we might have inclusion. Absolutely. It's not like, me as an Indian person, it's not like I can't enter certain spaces, but it also, I will be looked at differently and all that. So it's quite an interesting take.
Yeah, if I think about my own life, apartheid ended in South Africa in 1990 officially, right? But it was in existence maybe from like 1930-ish, right?
Wow.
So it was in existence for broadly about 80 years. When I started working in the early 2000s and I was appointed to an HR role, in South Africa, there's a piece of legislation in the basic conditions of employment that says that when an employee starts or leaves work between the hours of 6 p.m. and 6 a.m., it's the
Mhm.
responsibility of the employer to provide safe transportation for the employee.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that was in like 2004. It's not that long ago, right?
No,
So
that's that is not that long ago at all, and it's still happening today. I mean, I'm not sure about South Africa because I've never been, but at least here in the US, it happens all of the time.
I
All of
remember when I worked in India, it was a real fear for women in the office to leave the office after 5 o'clock and take public transportation in India. They'd
Yeah.
be like, no, we can't do this. I need to leave because I can't be on the train at 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah, it's not safe. It's not safe at all, and, it's really I feel like a lot of places, they don't take that seriously. It's not that they're unaware of it, yeah, at this point, you can't really say that you're unaware of it. You're surrounded by it all the time, especially nowadays. It's on the news, it's in on social media, it's, people are talking about it around you, but it's so much easier for, I think, a lot of places or a lot of people when it's not happening directly to them to be like, "Oh, well, it doesn't matter. This is what makes it easier for me, so that's what I'm gonna do."
I think it's more than that. And this is the inclusion part. We say we need to, if I use women as an example, we need to hire more women. Okay. So we hire more women.
Mhm.
But then we don't do anything to fast track their development. We don't do
Yeah.
anything to promote them into senior roles, right? So the diversity number looks good because you have a 50-50 split between male and female. The equity piece is, do you have enough women in senior leadership roles? That for me is always the test, right? And if you've ever heard Indra Nui speak, there's a very famous speech where she says, as a woman in leadership, you always have to juggle many things. And you have to know when to juggle it, how to juggle it, who will be there to support you in juggling it. Uh, she tells the story of the day she became a CEO and she went home and she's trying to tell her mother that. And the mother's like, oh, that's great, but we still need milk, right? So sometimes, that's the equity piece. But the inclusion piece is recognizing that you're going to hire someone that's a minority person. And what are you going to do about developing them? Not only as an associate, not only as an employee, but also as a person. Because sometimes we develop people and they do well in their role, they maybe do well in the organization, but they're not very well liked as a leader because their manager quality is poor. It's not just about developing one area. It's a lot like if you think about an iceberg, Or if you think about, I put you in a dark room, right? If I use recruitment as an example, if I give you a flashlight or a torch, you can only shine on one spot. But the more torches or flashlights I give you, the more I can see of who you
Yeah.
are, right?
Yeah.
And that's what inclusion is. Not only putting you in the room, not only putting a light on you, but also putting many lights on you to be able to develop you. And that should be par for the course, not I'm doing something special because the person is female.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. No, absolutely. Thank you so much for that insight. And thank you so much for speaking about that. I'm going to make sure that this part is inside of this episode because it's so important to talk about it. And, I love how you used your real life lived experiences and especially the environment that you grew up in. Like, I can't even imagine. So thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much for just being, an advocate for, you've talked about women so much on this episode. And as a woman, I appreciate that so much. So thank you so much for being an
I
advocate.
think it's
Great.
because
But
I think it's because men don't like to acknowledge the role that women play in their lives.
yes. Oh, yes. That's true.
Um, and I think, my mother always tells me, "Oh, don't forget, I'm the one that paid for your education and, I supported
Yeah.
you all these years." And one day I said, "Yes, mommy, but I also wrote the exam. You didn't write the exam for me." She said, "Yeah, that's true." But she said, "Don't forget, I was the one that was waking you up to make sure that you were studying to write the exam."
Exactly. Exactly. Which does not take away from you absorbing the knowledge and doing the exam, but it does, I think that says something. Okay. So, Mohammed, I'm going to say thank you for being here. So, if there's anything that you want to say, you also don't have to say anything, but if you want to say something,
I just want to say thank you for inviting me. It's always a privilege. I didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I did.
I'm glad you
And
did it.
it's also nice to know that people find what I say interesting.
Mhm.
And it's not, something that's big and scary, but it's something that all of us should be looking forward to. And I think that's the most important thing is just to embrace it and figure out what it can do for you. Like
Yeah.
the JFK that asked not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your
For your
country, right?
country. That's what it was. Yes.
So it is kind of the same thing. Not what AI can do for you, but what you can do for AI, because it's about supplementing your skills.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
And
Mahima.
I'll be sending you, I don't know if I already have, but I'll be sending you a invite on LinkedIn. So,
Okay, super.
okay.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Enjoy the
Thank
rest
you.
of your day.
Mohammed, thank you so much for joining us today. I think one thing that's become very clear throughout this conversation is that the future of work isn't just about adopting new technology, it's about building workforce strategies and operating models that can adapt to continuous change. Thank you for sharing your insights, and thank you to everyone listening.